And we are just seeing reports on the Reuters news agency that Hezbollah has said that today, Wednesday, it has attacked Israeli artillery positions with rockets in the first cross-border attack since the pager explosions. That news just coming into it. Hezbollah saying it has attacked Israeli artillery positions with rockets in the first cross-border attack since the pager explosions. There's been almost daily fire across the southern Lebanon, northern Israeli border since the October 7th attacks between Hezbollah and Israeli forces. Hezbollah, backed by Iran, of course, and an ally of Hamas. Well, let's speak now to Middle East security expert Behnam Ben Taleblu, who is a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy in Washington. And just to get your reaction, first of all, to that news literally coming into us in the last few seconds, a pretty speedy response from Hezbollah.
Indeed, pleasure to be with you. It does seem to be a rather prompt response from Hezbollah, which had waited at least several days when you look at the response to the killing of Fuad Shukr, for instance. But in this instance, I'm not surprised. What Israel may have been seeking to do is try to get Hezbollah not just to absorb the blow and to find some kind of restored deterrence in the north, but to potentially see if Hezbollah might be able to, in an attempt to save face, do some kind of escalation that might lose its head. I think we have to assess both the effectivity as well as the veracity of the strike that you mentioned on some of those artillery positions in the north to see if, at least tactically, that may have met politically one of the Israeli aims.
Speaking of tactics and politics, we just heard from Israel in the last couple of days that it had a new war goal, namely to allow the return of the many Israelis who've left the north of Israel on its border with Lebanon during this conflict, to allow them to return. So where does this action, the exploding pagers, where does that fit in with this stated war aim?
Well, it certainly is an attempt to, at least to a death by a thousand cuts approach vis-a-vis Hezbollah fighters, try to signal to Hezbollah that they cannot afford to continue the fight. Right now we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the October 7 terrorist attack. Hezbollah was the first of all of the Iran-backed actors in the region on October 8th to enter that fray. It continues to fire, including most recently based on those artillery positions you mentioned. Socially, this was always something the Israelis wanted to do. It was an economic issue, it was a political issue, it was a social issue to have 60 to 80,000 internally displaced persons from the north while you had mobilized the whole country for a war in the south, as well as to try to keep the whole country on alert against Iran-backed projectiles from multiple fronts. But again, the imperative of moving these people back to their homes and getting them to have a sense of security is going to require a whole of government effort in Israel. And I think that's precisely why you will see more military pushback by the Israelis, both overt and covert, the likes that we've seen now, in an attempt to get Hezbollah to stop firing, regardless of the situation in Gaza itself.
We're also seeing now another line, the head of the UN Human Rights Organization demanding accountability is the word that is used for the Lebanon pager explosions. And I guess the United States, where you are, will also be wanting answers. Antony Blinken in that news conference in Cairo, absolutely clear that Washington was not involved. There had been some reports that Washington had been told a very short time before the explosions happened. He denied there was any prior knowledge. So how will the US government be assessing this action in Lebanon, given that Mr. Blinken is obviously back in the region to try to make progress on a Gaza ceasefire deal, which would also deal with the question of the humanitarian rights of Palestinians, getting them back to their homes, and the question of the hostages as well?
Well, this is actually a very important question because Washington and Jerusalem have taken a different approach towards establishing peace in the region or establishing stability in the region because they both claim to want the same two things, the same two D words, deterrence and de-escalation. But when push comes to shove, Washington, as you see now, again with Blinken's most recent trip, the word he kept using and again was political will in his recent press conference. Washington will prioritize de-escalation over deterrence. So likely there'll be some kind of political transaction cost to the pager attack between Israel and the U.S. But the Israelis, when push comes to shove, will prioritize deterrence over de-escalation. And that means at least signaling a willingness to go through a few more escalatory rounds.
OK, Behnam Ben Taleblu, thank you very much for your thoughts on that developing story today. Thank you.